Hello, everybody. I'll be sharing with you the upcoming Sunday School lesson for April 10th. It is called The Passover with the Disciples, coming from Matthew chapter 26. There is a tradition that prisoners facing the death chamber get a last meal of their choosing. They get whatever they want. Last meals in some settings may lead to something unexpected, however. The last plague upon Egypt was the death angel. Moses predicted this and knew that this was the opportunity for the Hebrews to leave Egypt, what we call the Exodus. The preparations for Passover were extensive. First, the taking of a lamb without blemish for each household. Second, the killing of said lamb on a particular day and time. Third, the sprinkling of the lamb's blood on the doorposts and lintels of each house in which the lamb was to be eaten. Fourth, the roasting of said lamb with fire, roasting whole. Fifth, the eating of unleavened bread. There was no time to bake or leaven the bread. And bitter herbs, which represented their enslavement. Sixth, eating in haste with their loins girded, shoes on their feet, and staff in hand, meaning your suitcase is packed and ready. Seventh, remaining in the house until morning. And eighth, the burning of all that remained. The Passover could only be eaten at night. All this from Exodus chapter 12, the very first Passover. The night was a night of vigils. Be ready for what will come. And Passover is so called because when the death angel came and saw the blood on the doorpost, the death angel passed over them, saving their lives, but then not saving the lives of the Egyptians who did not have the blood on their doorposts. Passover was sacred to the Jewish people, still is, and it was understandable that Jesus would celebrate a Passover meal with his disciples. An upper room at night with the roasted lamb and the unleavened bread and bitter herbs and wine. But this Passover meal, which we call the Last Supper, had as much necessity and significance as the original Passover meal and experience approximately 2,000 years earlier. Your lesson for April the 10th uses Matthew 26 as the Bible reference, but I would like to recommend to you and encourage you to also read Luke chapter 22, verses 1 to 22, because Luke gives more detail. On Thursday of Holy Week, Satan conspired against Jesus through Judas Iscariot. Judas Iscariot had already made his pact with the devil and with the devil's henchman called the chief priest, for which he was paid 30 pieces of silver. Jesus, of course, knew of Judas's treachery, but he did not stop it. Instead, he sent out Peter and John to make the necessary preparations for the meal, purchase the sacrificial lamb, have it sacrificed at the temple by the priest, and then bring that cooked lamb, the paschal lamb, to the upper room where they would feast upon the lamb, the unleavened bread, the bitter herbs, and the wine. And then find the man, an unnamed disciple of Jesus, who would provide for them that upper room. And they found this man just as Jesus had instructed. They found the man carrying the water jug who would provide for them a large furnished upper room. The scene of the Last Supper was rather chaotic and confusing. Jesus surprised them all with the foot washing. The master became the servant. We hear of Peter's protest, but all would have their feet washed by Jesus that night. This was followed by the fourth step of the meal, the eating of the bitter herbs dipped with bread in a sauce called the sop, S-O-P. Jesus announced that one of the 12 would betray him, and when Judas Iscariot asked, "Is it I, Rabbi?" Jesus answered, "Yes, you have said it. You have confirmed it." The other disciples, however, were still confused, and Jesus highlighted the interchange with Judas by giving him a preferred morsel of dipped bread called the sop. Quote, "But when Jesus took the bread, or when Judas took the bread, at that moment Satan took complete possession of him, of Judas. He became furious because he had been discovered and exposed. And therefore, Jesus said to Judas, 'What you are doing, do it quickly.' And then Judas left to commit his act of betrayal. What happened next is what we usually remember when we celebrate the Lord's Supper as a church family, where Jesus broke the unleavened bread or the loaf and gave it to the now 11 disciples, also called apostles, and after giving thanks, commanded them to eat. "This is my body." Likewise, Jesus took the cup, and when he had given thanks, commanded them to drink. "This is," quote, "my blood of the covenant, which is being poured out for the many for the forgiveness of sins." And then they sang a hymn and went out into the Mount of Olives, where Jesus would pray the most agonizing prayer of his life, followed by Judas's kiss and betrayal, Jesus's arrest and false trials and beatings and execution. The night of abandonment and abuse that no human being should ever have to live through. The main point of all that happened that Thursday night going into Friday morning was that Jesus himself became the Passover sacrifice, the Paschal lamb, the lamb without blemish or stain, the one who died for the sins of humanity, your sins and mine. And then to process a new covenant based upon relationship, not based upon religion or good works, a new covenant of relationship was born, where Jesus died for me, his blood for mine, his blood for my sin and forgiveness, if only I ask, believe, and receive. I began my exposition of this lesson by describing the night of the Last Supper as chaotic, confusing. Luke 22, verse 23 says that following the meal, the disciples began to argue among themselves which of them was the betrayer. In one sense, virtually all of them were. Then they would argue over greatness, again, not understanding the message of humility and service which Jesus had been trying over weeks and months to ingrain into their mind and heart. In closing, I like the story on page 45 of the Learner's Guide. Corinne had all the appearances of being a follower of Jesus. As a collegiate student, she led a collegiate choir which grew by leaps and bounds. But in her personal life, she made a tragic decision with a guy, which led to a pregnancy and drug addiction. Her life was a mess. And for 8 years, she stayed away from church until one day, her own son, a 7-year-old boy, said, "Mom, come with me." In the process of coming to church, her relationship with Christ was restored. And the point being, there is hope for all of us. May you have a blessed week, and hope to see you on Sunday, on a great Lord's Day, on Palm Sunday. God bless.